Hey, Raimy, we're back. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Benny. How are you?
Doing well today. Excited for today's episode. Today's guest, this is guest number 2 on the pod. We're excited to have him here. We'll get to him in just a couple of minutes. At the outset, I just wanted to just encourage everybody who's listening to, like, share, subscribe, follow us here, comment away on the podcast. I know you do as well, all the comments, whether they're, serious or in jest or whatever the nature of it is, and wherever it is, appreciate all of it. So recommend everyone to do that. If you have recommendations for subjects, topics, or guests, by all means, share that with us as well. Good?
Amazing.
That's my public service announcement. Okay, now, our good of the week. I'm going to let you start good of the week this week.
Sure. My good of the week is sort of like a two-pronged one. First, it's a shout out to my brother-in-law, Barry, whose sweatshirt I'm actually wearing. It's got his name on it. Barry's been on a Brene Brown kick recently, and it's contagious. So I've been reading more Brene Brown, and she introduced a concept to me that helped me sort of get through a problem I've been having in one of my recent clients' fundraising. She talked a lot about the difference between empathy and sympathy, and how sympathy is really recognizing when someone's in pain. But the way that she describes it, if someone falls down in a hole, it's like the person with sympathy pokes your head down, waves and says, "That really stinks. Like, can I get you a sandwich while you wait down there?" Where the person with empathy climbs down in the hole with you and says, "I know what it's like to be down here. Like, I feel that pain." And the reason why it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me in terms of my fundraising is because I had a recent obstacle with a client. The client deals with people that are experiencing PTSD. And I had written something for them that talked about, how people that are going through this, that have experienced trauma, experience nightmares and anxiety and stress. And I thought I did a really good job of capturing what post-traumatic stress looks like. And the client turned to me and very nicely, but was sort of like, you describe it, but you don't get to that next level of how it affects their job, and they can't go to work, which by definition affects their relationships. And this like cascade of effects that happen because of the nightmares and because of the anxiety. And I was like struggling with that. And it was like hard for me to recognize that feedback. The feedback was 100% correct, but it was like a hard thing for me to recognize in myself that I didn't nail that. And Brene Brown, I feel like sort of analyzing it, like I had sympathy for the people going through this ordeal, but I didn't have empathy for them. And it sort of gave me the language a little bit to say, okay, like how can I capture it and really talk about the problem that these folks are going through in a real way? So my good of the week is Brene Brown. My task is now to take that and do something strong with the copy. So I don't have a final result to show for it yet, but I'm excited about the challenge, and I feel like I have a good framework to work through it now.
I love it. I'm a huge fan. At some point on the other podcast that I do, I think I called it my rabbi around sympathy and empathy and compassion and all those different, what you call soft emotions or soft leadership skills. And I've read a handful of her books and listened to many of her podcasts and presentations, and awesome. And I would say one of my great weaknesses as a human being is empathy is almost like not a thing on my end of it. I'm terrible at it, and I have to actually actively think about it. So I totally get that, and I appreciate you sharing about Brene Brown. She's awesome.
So two things. One is I'm at the very beginning of my Brene Brown journey and experience, so you have to tell me what to read and where to go. But the other interesting thing, just based on what you said, which was super interesting, that clicked for me, is the exact word she used. I remember because I had to read it a bunch of times because it struck me as empathy is a choice. It is a choice that we make. And that was I feel like we talk about it as something that's innate in people. Either you have it or you don't. But the fact that she talked about it as a choice and something we can give ourselves was very powerful to me.
Got it. Love it. Okay. My good of the week, and then we'll bring in our guest. My good of the week is the organization called the Kobe Mandel Foundation, and specifically their event called Comedy for Kobe. The Kobe Mandel Foundation is a foundation that was started in memory of a young boy by the name of Kobe Mandel, who was murdered in a terrorist act many years ago already at this point here in Israel. And his parents started an organization in his memory that's for families of that have been victims of terror And they've done an incredible amount of work around resilience and compassion and all those different things. Camps, summer camps for kids and programs for families and for parents. Amazing work. And what struck me the most, more than the work that they do, which is also, it was amazing, is this event that they do on a regular basis throughout the year called Comedy for Kobe, where they have somehow turned all of that pain into laughter. And they bring in just a tour of comedians from the US or from wherever, and they go city to city around Israel, and they just do comedy shows to raise money for the organization, to raise awareness for their work. And we went to one last night. My wife's company is a sponsor, and we went to one last night, and I hadn't laughed that hard in a really, really long time, which was great in its own right. But I was just, and I know the organization for a long time. I remember doing a little bit of work with them when I was at Cause Match, but just struck by that, the ability to sort of, it's a terrible way to say it, to make lemonade out of lemons, but to really flip that over and turn that into real positives, and a lot of positives for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And that the same thing, sort of that theme, it's a choice. And they've chosen to not, let it keep them in that certain space. And they've somehow, I'd say, overcome it. And it's not over. And as they said in the video, the pain never goes away. But the ability to laugh and to create laughter and joy around for people, amazing. And they've been doing it for years, and we've been going for years, and just a huge fan. So that's one's mine.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And they've made such a name for themselves. I mean, they are. Yeah. It is ubiquitous in this country. Like everyone knows.
Think about how many organizations try to match or try to copy that and can't. Yeah. They just can't.
Yeah. They're amazing. They're amazing.
That's okay, here he comes. I'm letting him in. Thought I clicked the, there it is. Letting him in. Hey. Here he is, our guest of the week. There he is, the one and only Jeremy Haselwood. How are you, sir?
The crowd's going wild. Crowd's going wild.
Yeah, I saw that the first guest was Jeremy Stern. We're making the Jeremy rounds? Like, what's going on?
This is the end of my Jeremy list at this point.
This is it. 2 and you're through.
I got 2.
Good to see you guys.
How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. No complaints at all. Life is good.
Okay. I'm going to do a little quick intro here of you so that people who don't know you.
This is drama. Well, he's
Maybe
really...
it's reverse. Are we supposed to introduce Bini?
Or he's built up the drama. People want to hear
We're back. Okay, good. Okay. I'm not going to even edit that out because I love when it gets all raw and real on the because I don't know how to do any of this stuff. So, okay, here we go. Where'd it go? Oh, I have it. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Jeremy Haselwood has spent over 20 years working with some of the biggest brands. Coca Cola, think Salvation Army. I pulled that off your website. I hope it's still true. To figure out what actually works in digital marketing and online fundraising. He's written a couple of books, the Digital Fundraising Blueprint, which is how I met you, and more recently, Finding Your Edge, which is about unlocking personal and professional potential. But really, the key about Jeremy isn't just theory and philosophy and the books. Very practical, very real, very inside as to what exactly is going on and happening, and lots of really practical tips and advice. And so it's great to have you here, and we're going to dive right in just a couple of seconds. Start us off, Jeremy. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for letting me come onto your show. And also, Bini, personally, thank you for the nice things that you said about me. I wanted to acknowledge that. Raimy, you could have done better. But Bini, you, amazing. Thank you for that. And that's
when Bini showed me what he was going to say, I didn't edit it out. I was like, no, don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it though, man. All sincerity, it's cool and it feels good to be acknowledged, man. So I appreciate you doing that. It meant a lot to me.
Good sir. Well, give me a little sense. What's that like over your shoulder? I always do this with people. I'm very into backgrounds. Yeah. So what's that little thing going on over your shoulder there?
Okay, I'm looking at a view. Hold on, let me change the. Okay, I'm trying to see what you see.
Like a turntable, a little record player kind of thing.
Okay, back here. Yes. Yeah, sorry, I had to adjust the size of my browser because it shows different things.
No problem.
Yeah, I needed a picture for my office that kind of fit my yellowish scheme that also captured a little bit about me. And I just found this picture. I don't remember if it was on Flickr or what, some royalty-free picture. But yeah, it's a record player. and it has like some sunglasses and a plant, and I think like a Vespa or something also like in the picture within the picture. But it was just like a cool little vibe, and I was like, I like this. That has a yellowish tint that goes with the couch. Perfect.
I'm glad that
Love
you
it.
think
I
about
love
that. I
that.
appreciate how much you think about getting that sort of to look exactly right in the frame kind of thing.
Yeah. And then, yeah, it actually, and I don't know if you can see, oh, if I move this way, you can see the books. This is actually the second book. Oh, and down here, I don't know if the screen can see it. That's the first book. And I happen to have
That's
it
on
There
here.
you go.
there
Yeah.
you
It
go.
You
just
happen
happens
to
to
have
be
it
Nice.
here.
handy.
Whatever. It just happened to be right here. Yeah. But no, I created like an office space because I've talked to both of you guys when I was in my previous
Yeah.
office space, which was like, when I moved into this house, it was like a former workshop, the people who had it before me. And it was just like, I could get the view right on camera, but if you were here actually in the room, it was a terrible room. It was the ugliest room. So one of my daughters, all my kids have left the house now. I took over her room, and I get to have like my real office, and it's beautiful. It's an amazing thing.
Awesome.
Got it. Okay,
Awesome.
good. Raimy, start us off.
Okay, Jeremy, you've built a career really at the intersection of marketing, digital fundraising, and personal development.
Yeah.
What was the defining moment for you that set you on this path? What's your origin story over here?
Yeah, it was actually nothing to do with, it did have to do with marketing, but not necessarily personal development and nonprofits. I live in Atlanta now. I'm originally from Oklahoma City. And I had this dream when I was a teenager, and it was a friend of mine. We had a music group. We were actually a rap group. And in my I was 20 years old, and I was like, I want to move somewhere and see if I can do something with the music. And Oklahoma was not necessarily a hotbed for hip hop. So I had to move. And it was either New York, LA, or Atlanta. And New York was too cold, LA's too Hollywood, and Atlanta was like, it was different. It was warm. I actually have an aunt that lives out here, so we crashed at her place for a summer. Like, let's try it out and see how it works. And like the first performance we had was an Apollo style show that was sponsored by a radio station. And Apollo style meaning they will boo you off the stage if they don't like you. And we actually won that show. So we're like, okay, we're going to stay here because there's some opportunity. So did music and worked a regular 9-to-5 corporate through most of my 20s. And got to a place where this dream that I followed, I like to say I followed my dream and found my purpose. So I followed my dream to Atlanta, thinking that it was the music. My purpose was music. And it got to a point where I was almost 30, and I just didn't like where I was with the music. I didn't really like the industry piece of it. I love creating, but it doesn't, it's like feast or famine with music, So, and most people are not feasting. And it was really hard. Had my son then. And I just had to really shift what I was going to be doing in life. So it was a lot of self-discovery. And this kind of comes to the personal development piece. Like some of my journey is really put into the second book that I put out, and some of the frameworks that I either borrowed or created or modified to really make me more focused on who I was as an individual. And it really helped to chart my path forward. And I've always been a marketer. Like even when I was like 15 years old, which is when I started writing, and I was in high school in a recording studio, busting tables on the weekends to afford studio time, and actually had cassettes made. Cassettes are cool again, apparently. But I was like, had some cassettes manufactured. Yeah, like if you go, because I'm still a big music person, like in terms of consumption. So you can get your vinyls now. And now when an artist drops, it's like, here's the vinyl, here's the cassette. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to go back to cassettes. But anyway, different podcast, different story. So, had cassettes manufactured. And so sales, marketing, like I was doing all of that, like in high school, selling these from my locker. And even when I was doing music in Atlanta, I was working with some independent artists here in the Atlanta area, helping them with their websites and social media. And it's all like, I love that kind of stuff. Like there's a passion there for me. With the nonprofits, I was blessed enough to be able to work at an agency that strictly served nonprofits. And that just really opened me up like, wow, there's actually companies that only do marketing for nonprofits, and you can actually make a decent living doing that. Like, I love this work. So those are kind of the bullet points of how I got into what I got into and started my company. It'll be 11 years this year, focusing mainly on nonprofits. I do some for profit, but probably 70% of the work that I do is for nonprofits. So that's the intersection. The personal development is really my journey. To me, that's my purpose-driven work. The marketing is what I'm passionate about and have a talent to serve others in doing that.
I'm curious,
Yeah,
have you ever
thank you.
done radio? Like, you have a voice for radio.
Yeah, actually, I did in college, and I wanted to pursue radio a little further, but in my 20s, I was like, I was more focused on being an artist than being in radio. But yeah, man, like when I moved to Atlanta, I started working at the college radio station, and when you're brand new working college radio, like you get the shifts that are like the worst. So it was 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Sunday nights. So it was a busy time of life. So I was working a 9 to 5 for a telecom company, had to be at work at 11 a.m. And then I was taking a full course work, like 18 hours of classes. So 18 hours of classes, 40 hours a week. And then I was like, I want to do radio also and music. So yeah, so I would basically Sunday nights, I would sleep for a couple of hours, take the train into the station, to the radio station, work at 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., go home, sleep for a couple hours, go to work a whole shift. Like life was, I don't even know how I did it, but it was fun and no regrets.
How long could you keep that up for? How long did you do that for?
I mean, I did that for like, when I moved to Atlanta, I still had a couple years left of school. So I did that for 2 years. And yeah, but at the time, like my body, of course, I was like early 20s then. So I feel like my body, I couldn't do that now. There's no way I could do it. My body was acclimated to doing it. I was never really tired, just kind of thriving off of the energy. And, like when you're young and you're really just going after something, you don't have kids, like you have a lot of energy. So I was just going after it. This is the goal. Every single day I'm working towards it.
And what was it? It was a hip hop show, or was like talk? What was it?
No, man. Yeah, it's like it's wherever they throw you. It was, I think they called it regular rotation. But yeah, you got some weird people that called in at night, because they're doing nothing else. And they warned me about it. They said, you're going to get some crazy folks that call you. And I did. And I remember one story, like I was brand new, it was probably the first week that I did it. And there was like some record I was playing. I played the wrong song and it had like some profanity in it. And, that's not supposed to play that. I didn't know that I was playing it. So I was like freaking out about this song. And so I'm like, oh, they're going to fire me already. It's my first day here. But whenever you play a song with profanity, you have to fill out like some form for the FCC and why you played it and all this disclaimer stuff. And I was so like, oh man, this is my shot. I got on radio and I blew it, but it happens. It was, like AM, nobody heard it. It didn't matter.
Except for the crazies.
Yeah, except for the crazies. And they probably got energy off of that. Yeah, but no, it was like just kind of college, alternate music. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a genre. It was just a lot of different kind of genres on this particular college station.
I have to be honest, I was thinking about rapping the intro, but
yeah, you should have.
It doesn't work for me, but I did hear, and I told Raimy about this, I did hear your like season 1 summary of your podcast, and that you did like a 5-minute rap, which I was like, we're not going to do that, Raimy. But it was, I was like, oh, that is special, unique, and, in your wheelhouse to do.
Yeah.
But I was going to go there. So I'm curious from you, you shifted over. So you talked about passion, and you talked about purpose, and in the intro to your second book, you talk about that idea as well, or somewhere in there, you talk about that as well. So how did it become like this, like the digital marketing, the nonprofits, that whole thing? And how did that become everything? Was there like a moment? Was there something that happened, or just over the course of time, you rolled into it?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in marketing. Like I said, even from the time I was a teenager, and I was like that person at a young age. Even I was big into music, so I was always trying to turn people on to new music groups. So that is marketing. That's word of mouth. So my undergrad degree was in marketing. So it's like I always like the idea of connecting consumers with something that either they need or that they don't know that they need, and it brings some kind of joy or quality to their life. So that was like the foundation of marketing has always been there. Now, when I was focusing on like music and stuff, I didn't really care what my job was. I just needed a job to help fund music. But when the music ran its course, I'm like, all right, I need to get like a job that I really want to use my talents, that I'll enjoy. And I was applying for a lot of different positions, and there was an agency that I worked for, that I ended up working for, that I mentioned a moment ago. I didn't mention the name, but that served nonprofits. And I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool, to use my skills for good in a way. And I was fortunate enough to get that job. One of those rare occasions that I got a job that I just submitted on. Usually when you get a job like that, doesn't happen. You have to know somebody or know someone that knows someone. And I just submitted blindly. And I just feel like that was kind of a destiny kind of thing. And I love that work so much because just helping nonprofits, like I knew that I was a part of something, even just like a small little itty bitty piece of a spoke in the wheel that contributed to creating a better life or society, knowing that the work that I'm doing is raising money. And now there's a family that can have a roof over their head tonight. And I was actually a part of that. Like, it was so fulfilling. As the agency world has it, when they get new clients, they usually hire more staff. And then when they lose clients, they get rid of staff. And I was a part of the getting rid of staff with this job. And I was really disappointed by that, because I was like, man, I felt like I'd finally arrived. Like, man, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I love this work. I love my clients, great relationships with my coworkers, with my clients. But at the end of the day, it's like, we lost a client. We have to save money as a company, and we have to get rid of folks. And that's just what it is.
When was
what
that?
I found
What
was
that? 2008?
yeah, this was
2009?
2000. Wait, no, that's not right. That's not right. Gosh, I don't know. We're going to take too long
That's
of a
fine.
pause
No,
in the podcast for me to remember back.
Brain.
Yeah,
Don't tax your
it
brain.
was a while ago.
Okay.
It was a while ago. Yeah, if I had to guess, probably 15, 16 years ago. So whatever the math is on that. But what was interesting about that, even like the next day after I was laid off, I was like, I'm starting my company because I want to keep doing this work. And I was freaked out because I was like, that was my livelihood. I'm like, all right, I have no plan B. This is it. So I'm gonna start my company. The next day I filed for Ampla Marketing. But also, if there's people listening that are into entrepreneurship or starting their own thing, like I didn't just start Ampla and now I'm just all 100% Ampla, because I'm not a fool. Like, I need money and I had no clients. So I still was looking for a job while I was trying to get my company up and going. And in fact, I ended up working at 2 additional agencies while I was building up my company. But through that process, I worked for an agency that didn't serve nonprofits, but they served brands like Coca Cola and the big consumer packaging. And it was a very distinct difference. And, you got to do some cool things, and you had pretty decent budgets and got to do some innovative type of marketing. But there was kind of it kind of lacked something, It's like you can have a tough week or a tough month with a client like a Coca Cola, and no disrespect to them, but it's just like, it's hard. And you're like, at the end of the day, you're just helping push soft drinks. Whereas you can have a tough day or month with a nonprofit, but it's like, this work still matters, like it still affects somebody. So that was kind of like the affirmation, like I need to get back to doing more work with nonprofits. Like, it's an important part of who I am as a person, just caring about other people and making sure that as a society, like, we're in a better place than how we leave it in a better place than what it was when we got here. So that's really how. So I've been very intentional about maintaining a sizable base of my clients that are nonprofits. A majority of them are nonprofits, but I do still work with some for-profits. So that's been the journey, and it's been cool, man. Met both of you guys through it, met a lot of cool people through it, people just with great hearts that really care about the work. And I'll tell anybody, man, like, the work that I've been able to do with nonprofit agencies and with nonprofits, it's like, it's good people, man. Like, for the not everybody, but for the most part, the numbers skew much on a higher level of good than they do in other sectors.
I feel like
because people actually have a heart for the
there's
work.
a person you're thinking about when you say that with such force, but I'm not gonna probe that one.
Yeah. No, it's not a specific person. It's just more like, I as I was saying that, I recalled a couple of situations and like, I remember how that felt. I don't remember a face or name, But I'm always very careful to use like certainty words like everybody or all or nobody, because that's just not true. So yeah, there are some exceptions to that rule, but in general, by far, like wonderful people and just genuine, great relationships and people that care about the work.
And when you engage with these nonprofits and the corporations as well, in what capacity are you engaging with them? Like what services what's your standard engagement look like with them?
Yeah, definitely in the realm of digital marketing and fundraising. And from there, it's whatever the needs are. So I'm not direct mail, I'm not mass media or TV or radio ads. Like it's specific to digital marketing, digital fundraising. So from that perspective, it can be everything from like your campaign planning. Like if you have direct mail, it's like, how do we integrate direct mail with your digital marketing to make sure that, for one, the messaging is lined up, the images, the themes, the time that your emails drop versus when your direct mails drop, like the schedule is all mapped out. From an execution standpoint, it's everything from email to social media content and Facebook ads, Google ads. So any of that, like I don't build websites. However, I can do the website strategy. Like, and I'm cool with not building websites. It's not my gift. I don't want to be this person that does everything. Like I know people that can build websites and I know how it needs to look and how it needs to be effective for a nonprofit. So here's the strategy, go create it. So that's really what I play in, is the digital realm.
Nice. And I'm curious, one of the things that I like doing for my own professional development and learning is like taking for-profit best practices and applying them to the nonprofit field. And you're someone who's like lived and breathed that, and having a foot in both worlds. So I'm curious, aside from, let's say, the feeling that you get working for Coca Cola versus Salvation Army, and aside from what I'm guessing is going to be their budget size, what differences do you see when working between those two different sectors when you're dealing with a for-profit company versus a nonprofit?
Yeah. The interesting thing is, we talk about the differences, but there's also like, what are the similarities? Because one thing that is really similar is, even though it's like a Coca Cola, their budgets are still like, we have a budget, and you still have to work within the confines of the budget. And Coca Cola is a rare case because their budget is definitely bigger, but there's for-profit companies where you're really like squeezing them for budget like you would have to do with the nonprofit. And I think that the general thought out there is that that's not how it is with for-profit companies. But, there's been for-profit companies that I've worked with where I'm like, all right, here's to do everything that you want to do. Here's the budget. And they're like, oh, we don't have that. What can we do if we get X amount of budget? And they give you maybe 20 or 30% smaller. It's the same battles that you fight with a nonprofit. And then also an interesting thing is, from a data standpoint, when you work with larger nonprofits, you think that they have their data all figured out. I mean, I remember I was just blown away by some of the larger nonprofits that I've worked with in terms of their CRM data and how they're segmenting audiences and things that you, going into the work, you would think that it's very pristine and clean because these are big organizations, but it's a mess. And it's also like that with a lot of for-profit companies. I think the main differences, though, now I've said the similar, but to answer your question, the main differences would be nonprofits are still behind the times. There are just mastering the basics. There's still a lot of nonprofits that haven't even sent an email. Like they're so focused on what's always worked, which has been direct mail, and which still works today. Like I don't knock direct mail. I can't, because the numbers are the numbers. Direct mail is still very effective, as here in the United States at least. So it's like, from a digital standpoint, I usually get a smaller piece of the budget when it comes to fundraising, because direct mail is like 80% of the attribution for the revenue coming in. So it's kind of blows my mind in that respect, but that's what it is. The numbers are starting to shift a little bit. So there's an education curve for sure with nonprofits, teaching here's why we need to do this, setting up an email, here's why we need to test the subject lines here. There's a big difference within even how you write a direct mail letter versus how you write an email. It's people interact with these forms of media a little bit differently. You'll see in direct mail the use of like underlined words, but in an email, if a word is underlined, that means it's probably a link. So you don't want to throw an underlined word if it's not actually linking to something. So there's just a different approach to that. But yeah, it's just a lot of nonprofits just still haven't mastered the basics.
Right.
And I think that's probably the biggest difference.
Does it drive you crazy when you see an email that was for sure a direct mail letter, or the reverse where they send you the email in the mail? Does that drive you bananas because of the work you do?
It doesn't drive me crazy. It just makes me kind of, I don't know if roll my eyes is the right response, but it's lazy. I'll just say it like that. It's just like, come on, like I can understand an argument for it. Like we want it to be the same, but it doesn't need to be the same. Like you can get the same sentiment. Like a direct mail letter may be 2 or 3 pages. Nobody's going to interact with your email if they're just scroll, and they just have to read 2 or 3 pages worth of an email. So how can we distill that down into something smaller and more bite-sized that can still get that action that we want people to take? And that's the piece. I look at it as an opportunity, like, wow, this might be an organization I should reach out to. Say, hey, here's what I saw. Maybe I can help you with this.
I hear that. I get the same feeling when I see social media where they're putting the same exact post on different platforms. And I think the same thing. Like, I get that you want to be, because you think you need to be on all the different platforms, but it strikes me as a little bit lazy when you're right. You're trying to put something in, on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, that you're putting on one of the other ones. And it just like, you can have that's not strategy. That's sort of like, let me splatter it against the wall, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. However, I'm also guilty of doing that sometimes. So it's like some do as I say, not as I do.
I understand.
Yeah. And also there's
your honesty
of
on
course. Yeah, because if people like dug up the dirt on me, they'd be like, oh, well, Jeremy does this sometimes. And I'm not going to be the hypocrite because I do that sometimes. And part of it, I can say, yes, sometimes I'm lazy. But also I teach a course with Charity How To for nonprofit, for social media, creating social media. And I actually address that in the course. And one of the things I say is like, the best practice is to version it out a little bit differently for each platform. However, all 3 of us know like nonprofits are severely under-resourced. So I'm like, don't overthink it. Like if you only have time to create one because you've got 20 other things, man, just put the same thing on everyone. I'm not going to hit you too hard on that. Like I understand why, but also it is against the best practice. Like even with mine, I've seen the posts that you guys have put out. It's like I might use the same video, but the way that I'm talking, like the caption or the copy that accompanies the post will be a little bit different. Like when I'm posting on Instagram versus LinkedIn, I'm not going to use the same amount of hashtags and emojis and stuff like that. So even like those subtle differences really make a difference whenever you're speaking to the audience of that particular platform.
Is there a channel that you recommend right now, or that you were saying for nonprofits is like, this is where you should be?
Yeah, I mean, it's still Facebook, in my opinion. If I had to choose one, I would say Facebook. But that's because I'm looking through a fundraising lens. And the audience that Facebook is comprised of is more in line with that age group and that demographic for fundraising. If you look at the average age of a digital donor is 65-ish. And those people are not on TikTok for sure. They're getting more and more on Instagram. It's kind of like how when Facebook first started, like they weren't on Facebook, but then all the folks with gray hair took over Facebook, and then all their kids and grandkids are like, we're out of here. We don't want them, all up in our business, looking at our pictures, making comments. I don't want to hear from my grandmother or my mom commenting on my posts. So they're like, we're going to Instagram. We're going to TikTok. But so you have an older demographic that's on Facebook, and you have a younger demographic too. I'm just being silly, but that's where your donation audience is. Now, TikTok, as long as we have it, I don't know, here in the US, we have it again. I don't know how long it'll be here or if it's going to be for good, but it's a good marketing channel. Instagram's a great marketing channel. Even like Pinterest, LinkedIn, these are good marketing channels. But from a fundraising social media perspective, like Facebook is still, if I had to prioritize, I'd do Facebook, then Instagram. And I have my own personal reasons, like with Twitter. Like I just don't, I like to go to Twitter for me to get news, but I don't I hardly ever post on there, and I would never do any advertising on Twitter. I just can't support it in that respect. That's just a personal choice.
I'm curious, both of you. Can I ask both of you, because you guys are both sort of in this space. So is it then that you're marketing on like the Instagram and the TikToks, and you're driving traffic to the landing page, or you're driving traffic to the Facebook page? Like, how is that strategically working? And both of you, this is a question really for both of you. How does that work? Like, what's the play there?
Yeah. Go, Raimy. You first, so I can think.
No, please.
So I'm going to answer, so you're going to think about yours? Okay, I see.
I'm just going to agree with whatever you said. Whatever you said is exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, I was going to do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, exactly what Raimy said.
Nice.
No, I mean, I would say, like, from a social media content, yeah, I'm always very strategic about social media content, as one should be. And that's one of the things I teach. Like, you have to have some idea of what you're posting consistently. So when people visit your social media, I don't care if it's Instagram or TikTok or whatever the channel is, like, it's part of your brand. So when people go there, it should fit your brand, like what you're saying, the things that you post about. And there should be some consistency. Like, I should know what to expect when I see your content. Because what can happen, and I've seen this happen, there has been an organization that I won't name, and they used to post things on their page that were more for their internal audience. Like, hey, here's what we're having in the cafeteria today. And yeah, some of that can be interesting to the external world, but the way that it was written was not for the external world. So it's like, why would you use your social media to really communicate internally? And that's just weird to me. And it didn't sit right with me. It's like, let's use something where we can engage people. And there's be nothing wrong. Like, if you're like a leader of an organization and you're at lunch, hit my mic here. Hopefully I didn't make too much noise. It's like, hey, here's what we're serving today, but you're talking to your audience, whether it's a live or a reel or something like that. There's a way that you can use that content, but the way that it was used was incorrectly. But you can use social media, pointing it towards your donation pages. Now, we would probably, all three of us probably agree, you don't want to use social media as just fundraising. You want to slide in some fundraising messages because you are a nonprofit and people understand that. But yeah, point to a donation page there. If you need volunteers for an event, you're pointing to your volunteer page. So you're not always having to point somewhere. Sometimes it's just a post to engage with that particular post. Because another thing to think about, especially with like Meta, and by Meta, it's like Instagram and Facebook, when you get people to engage with your posts, like, Meta is storing that data. So whenever you want to run an advertising campaign for fundraising, you can select an audience of people who have engaged with your post. That means they've either liked, commented, or shared your post. So there's also intrinsic value within Meta, at least, where people who are engaging with you, they'll also see the ads whenever you start to run ads through that platform. So I'm not going to say everything, because I know Raimy has a lot to say about this.
No, I love the way that you frame that, especially that last point, because what I was going to say, had I gone first, was that my instinct is always to assume that this is going to be a short-term situation. So if you want, whatever your reason for that post is going to be, if it's a donation page, then get them directly to the donation page. Like, make that an emotional, frictionless process that you can just ask for the donation, get them to the donate page. Or if you're going to get them to a registration form to volunteer, like, whatever you're going to do it quickly. But I think you bring up a really good point, which is that there is a longer game to be played, where there is such a thing as an awareness campaign or something like that, or you can put up a cool video or something celebratory, that there's no real call to action, no other than to engage with the post, but you can take that information and use it for later and think more of a longer game. I mean, I love that point. I think that's really, really strong. And it's sort of thinking 2 steps ahead, which when you have the ability to do and to strategize in that way can be super, super effective.
Yeah. No, that's good.
It's good stuff, man. Thank you both.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm interviewing both of you. Double the pay. Double the pay for the interviewer. Okay, love it.
We've been spending these last couple of minutes talking about social media, and I wanted to ask the same question Bini asked about social media, but about all of the digital channels that we have at our disposal here. Do you have one? Is social where you direct organizations, if they do have those limited resources and they need to focus on one channel? Is there one that's better than the other that you're thinking this is where you should focus your energies?
My preference is email. Before social. And I know it's also going to depend on the size of an email list. If you only have a couple hundred emails, then we need to build that up. If you have several thousand emails, even better. And the reason for that is, to me, it's pretty clear. When you post on social, the amount of people that will see that post is very minimal. Because of the algorithms, there may be like 2% to 6%, 10 on a good post might see your actual post that you put out there. We spend a lot of time creating graphics, writing copy, and getting your social media posts just right to have like 2 people do this. Boop. And it's like the thumbs up. If you're listening to this on the audio, that's what the boop was. It was me lifting my thumb. Yeah. If you're not watching the video, they're like, what is boop? So you put all this work in, and it can be disheartening because you're like, I spent like hours creating all this content for 2 people to like it, and maybe I'll get a comment. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do social media. Like, you have to do social media. Like, that's like the cost of doing business, as they'd say. But with email, your open rates will be anywhere from should be, not will be, because it depends on the quality of your emails. Should be between maybe 20 and 40% would be a decent email rate or open rate. So you have a lot more people that will see, percentage-wise, that will see your emails. But also, I recommend like building up that email list because, again, going back to advertising and campaigns, you can use those emails and upload them into Google and Meta. So when you're running your campaigns, you can actually target those users within Instagram, Facebook that use that same email address. So to me, email is a data point, but it's the data point that has the most exposure to your message, more so than a social media. Unless you have I was going to say, unless you're like a really big nonprofit that has 100,000 followers. If you have that many followers, you probably have a sizable email list anyways. But just for it to engage and get that call to action, I'd prioritize email over social media.
Do you think organizations take it for granted and they forget about email and they're looking at the shiny, happy new platform and therefore it's underrated as a space for organizations to operate in?
Yeah, I would say definitely to that, because email may seem old school to some marketers and looking at things very tactically and what's hot now. Like when I'm seeing a lot of nonprofits investing a lot of time and energy and resources into TikTok when it's that's not because it's so popular. It's but what's popular isn't necessarily what's for you, especially when it comes to nonprofits. When I look at a TikTok or an Instagram, even though your fundraising, your donor demographic isn't highly represented, on those platforms, it's still a good influence channel. And that's why I refer to it as a marketing channel, because you'll get the younger audience who can influence a parent. Maybe they saw a cool video from an animal care organization. They're like, oh, dad or mom or grandparent, this is a cool organization. I don't have the money, but could you make a donation? And that will happen. It won't be the same amount or the same conversion rate as the donor audience, but it is an influential audience. And in some respects, it is the long game, because you want to start reaching these younger generations with messaging and kind of tie them into having an affinity for your brand. So you have to work both of these angles. But if I had to work where most of my resources are going, it's going to go into that 50 plus audience when it comes to digital. And I do want to market to a younger audience, but I'm not going to put all my chips on either one, because that's not a very smart way to go about it either. But yeah, email, I'm rambling, but to answer your question, Benny, email is I think it is overlooked because it might be viewed as it's not new. And, there hasn't been, you think about email, it's there's an email platform that you use. Social media, there's several different social media platforms. And it's not as sexy in a way as people would say. It's just email, but it's very effective if you're using it correctly. And maintaining, that's a whole separate podcast, is just maintaining your email list so that you can actually be effective with email fundraising and communication.
Well, I was going to ask you about the term data hygiene, which is I got from your book, but it very much fits in, but I'll save it for the next time you come on. So
yeah, I can give a brief thing because if you're going to bring it up, I'll give a brief.
Give me a minute here on it because I hear what you're saying, but it sounds like you're doubling down on email, and therefore an organization should also double down. The hygiene piece is really important.
Yeah, and this is really crucial because I'm assuming like most of the people listening to this work for nonprofits, and I'm actually, thank you for the space to say this because it's so important to the performance of email. If you're an organization that's sitting on emails that you've had for years and you've noticed your open rates going lower and lower and lower, like there's some I've worked with, their open rates were like 3%, 7%. And that's just like, man, something is wrong here. And I'll tell a quick story on what may be happening. Your emails might be going to the spam folders of Google, Yahoo, whatever, or the promotions tab. And that happens because your open rates are starting, you have bad emails basically. So data hygiene is taking care of your emails, making sure that you're sending to people who want to hear from you. Email used to be a game about numbers, like the quantity of emails mattered more than the quality, but we're not in that game anymore. You need to be far more concerned about the quality of your email addresses than you are the quantity of them. So if you have, and this is a real life example, there was a client many years ago, they had about 80,000 email addresses, and it was around like the holidays, very important fundraising time. We sent out an email, and this email totally flopped. I think the open rates were like maybe 7%, and they were used to getting like 20-something, 30-something%. And what we found was most of these emails that we sent, 75% of those emails went to the spam folder. And that's because this organization never cleanse their data. There's a lot of tools out there now, even built into the email platforms where you can select it's pre-built in. Do not send to inactive email subscribers, which means if these people haven't opened an email from you in 6 months, 12 months, don't send them an email because they're tanking the quality of your overall email. So on the Google side of that, what it looks like is, because they can see how many people are opening emails from your IP address, which is really, think of your IP address as like your home where you're sending your emails from. They're looking at your IP address and they're like, oh, these emails open rates are very low. So people don't really want to open these. So we're going to move those over to the spam folder because Google is a product and they have users just like every other company. They want to provide a good experience, but if your experience means you're getting a lot of emails that you don't want to open, then that's bad for Google because they want you engaged in your email, your inbox. So if it looks like you're probably not going to engage based on what Google sees, they're going to place your email in the spam folder. So if you haven't cleansed your data or if you're not using those filters when you're sending out email, I would rather send to 5,000 engaged email addresses than 80,000 unengaged emails. It's better quality. Google will look at that and say, oh, there's 50% of people open this email. This is a very popular email. We're going to make sure that this IP address hits the inbox. So that's kind of the high level of how that works. And it's so like it will tank your fundraising program, your digital fundraising, not just your email, but your fundraising overall, because email is still the highest channel, I think, outside of search that generates the most money, a digital channel, outside of website. Because, of course, if people go to your website, yes. But in terms of like outreach, email is going to raise a lot more money than social media will. So you have to take care of that.
Amazing.
That's like gold, right? If you walk away with just the last 4 minutes of the podcast, just on email and email hygiene and the data hygiene piece, and just what you said there about increasing your visibility with those emails and getting inside the inbox and just strategizing there, like most nonprofit leaders would have gained just a tremendous amount just with that tip here, because I think, Raimy, you'd send out a lot of emails too. Like they just assume it's just going to go and it's going to land in the inbox and whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not appreciating completely what open rate means and how that's being interpreted on all the different sides of that email that's being sent out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you throw into that the fact that, again, you're going to be using those email addresses to remarket to people,
mm-hmm.
it's gotten a lot of negative consequences if you're not keeping that list clean. So it's great.
Let me speak to that real quick too, Raimy, because the remarketing piece. There is some value to an email address that doesn't open. So for me, I have like an email address. It's like an old email. It's like a Hotmail email address. So it's like old from the dawn of email. But that's like the junk email that I use when I sign up for things that I don't want. Even like Facebook back in the day, my Facebook account is still tied to that. Now that email, if it's sitting on someone's email list, like I'm never opening that email. So it looks like low quality. However, if a company has that email address and they target me with a Facebook ad, I'm still going to see that ad because I use that old junky email.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And you're not an irrelevant audience. You're a relevant audience, even though by your email you wouldn't know it.
Exactly. So as an email an email donor, terrible. But if, again, we talked about exporting email addresses and showing Facebook ads, like I would see it. I won't see it if you're sending me an email. It's going to go to my spam folder. But if I'm on Facebook, I'll see it because I use that same email address to log into Facebook. So yes, quantity still works when it comes to retargeting. So if you are sitting on a bunch of email addresses, there's you can export those, save them in a file somewhere, and use that as a file that you target people with when it comes to advertising. But when you're emailing, like, let's refine that list and send it to the people who actually want to hear from us. And I would do that at least twice a year, every 6 months at a minimum, do that. And it's hard to let go. It's like, oh man, like you go from like thousands of emails to a few thousand or hundreds. It's like, man, but you're actually doing your email a service. And if you do that, and you're doing it a disservice if you're not taking care of it.
So faced with the same question that you offered before, 5,000 engaged email addresses versus 80,000 unengaged. When you're coming to the remarketing, you're taking the 80,000. When you're talking to email, you're taking the 5,000.
Exactly. Yep.
This is awesome. Love it. We're running out of time, Jeremy Haselwood. We're running out of time here with you. So we're going to have you back to really get into some of the other stuff in terms of the books, which is, again, as I said, that's how we met, was through your first book. And the second book, certainly, because I want to talk about, maybe I'll have to start another podcast about personal coaching and personal development. But I'm curious, we're going to get more into like a rapid fire mode here for just like for the next few minutes here as we finish out the hour. If you could quickly fix one thing in nonprofit fundraising, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, that is not rapid fire. That's very... What one thing would I fix?
What, you had a magic wand and you could sprinkle some pixie dust around it, what would it be?
I would say testing more.
Good.
That's it.
I know.
Rapid fire, right?
Rapid fire.
Testing.
I know you got a little bit of sports in your backgrounds and in your family. So fundraising were a sport. What would it be and what position would you play?
College football, man, and quarterback. Come on now. Yeah.
Love it.
That's what I would be. The best sport alive.
OU is going to be like a big OU, like Oklahoma.
Yeah, let's see. There we go. Oh, I have to turn that helmet up there. It's not ready for the shot. But yeah, OU, University of Oklahoma.
Now, has that changed because of all the NIL stuff? Once you're on the subject of like, is nonprofit fundraising still a sport like college football with all the money that's now? I'm off topic.
No, maybe more like WNBA. You have like it's underappreciated, but a lot of talent there, and it hasn't really got its full due. I'll plant the flag in WNBA for that.
Wow,
that's good.
Okay,
that's a good answer. I like that.
I was not expecting that as an answer. That's a very good answer. Okay, think through the different orgs and campaigns that you've seen over the last little while. What's something that you've seen that made you cringe?
Cringe. Oh man, I thought you were going to go the other way. I was trying to think of like a really cool
one. We can do the other side too, but just cringe, really bad.
Yeah. I cringe every time I see a fundraising email that has social media icons in it. Like I literally cringe. It'll be this nice email. You scroll to the bottom and it has like your Instagram icon, your Facebook icon. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? And let me explain why. Please. Because it's a fundraising email. The only thing that you want people to do on a fundraising email is click donate. That is the only doorway out of this room. We're not giving you a window that says, come look at us on Facebook, or a back door that says, come follow us on Instagram. Like, no, the only thing, focus, an email should only have a donate button. That's the only, if people want to get out of this room, like that's the only exit out. It's like, that's it. So when I see emails that are fundraising and I see the icons, I'm just like, it hurts me. Like, I feel like I've been punched in the stomach. And I literally do. I'll see an email today at some point that's fundraising, and I'll see those icons, and I'm going to have that reaction. Now, if it's an e-newsletter or something, cool, man. Like, that's the place for the exits. But for fundraising, absolutely not.
You want to do the other side of that too, because you want to do something positive just to balance the scales here with us?
Yeah, I mean, there was a campaign I was a part of many years ago that I thought was incredible. It was a very integrated campaign. It was around the holidays, as had direct mail, of course, email, all the stuff that you would think, email, banner ads, social media. But then also there was a physical space in this city where this nonprofit was, and they used window hangs, and they had QR codes. They had a gift catalog online where you can donate $20 that represented like a teddy bear, and $50 for a bicycle or something. Downtown and it was actually in Boston, there was windows, and it had like a picture of a teddy bear, and it's like, scan this QR code, and it would take you directly to that page within the gift catalog. It was just really cool how it was all executed, and the fonts were the same, the pictures were the same, it was just like this orchestra of all these pieces, and more so than you normally see for a full fundraising campaign. And the way that it all worked together was just beautiful.
Awesome. If you could grab coffee, any historical figure, alive or dead, to talk specifically about marketing and persuasion, who are you choosing?
Gosh, Steve Jobs, maybe?
Hard to argue with that.
That would be the first that would come to mind. Like, I think of like people in ancient history, but I wouldn't be able to really talk digital with them, So I want someone I could talk some digital with. And Steve Jobs, hate him or love him, I think he just had an incredible mind and understood things about consumers and how to connect consumers with technology. Like, I heard him say, and you guys may have heard this, like, and I'm going to mess up what he said, but to paraphrase, it was like he created like the iPod. It was something that people didn't know they needed. It's like, we always think about, what do people need? And we create this product or service that people need. But he's like, people didn't even know they needed the iPod. So like that kind of mindset, just creating something for a need that we didn't even know existed. And then you find a way to just sell a bajillion of those things. Like, that's just incredible to me.
Isn't that what Henry Ford said about the car? If he would have asked people, they would have said, "Give me a better horse."
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Similar idea, right? So you get the idea,
Yep.
Like, you need to recreate or create the new market that people don't appreciate
Yes.
that they needed in the first place. I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to finish this out here, Jeremy Haselwood. Last question for me.
Okay.
What's something you're working on now that that you're really excited about that is not public at the moment, let's say?
Well, but then it's going to be public if I talk about it, right? Come on, Benny.
Modify the question.
Don't try to trap me,
you
man.
get the idea here. Come on.
Yeah. No, actually, it's what's next.
Okay, what's next?
And it's funny you ask that, because I've gone public, but I haven't said anything about it on social media or anything. But I'm going to use your podcast even before my podcast, because I'm going to start talking about it more on season 2, and that is these guys right here. This
Saw
is
them on your website. Okay, go. Clarity cards.
Yeah. See, but clarity cards, yeah. So it is, and that's why I say it's public, but I've done zero promotion or anything around it. But yeah, clarity cards, it goes with my second book, but it's just these questions. I don't know if this will be backwards. But
So I know, came out good.
It did. Okay. So what role does gratitude play in your life? So it's 52 cards. How do you stay positive during difficult times? So these are like reflective cards when you're on that path of personal growth that you can journal with. It's also good for like team building and really challenging you. I've put these in the hands of some of my friends and a couple of groups that I've gone to here in Atlanta. And I'm like, hey, I want to get your feedback on these. And they're all excited. They see a deck of cards. They're like, ooh, that, like it's going to be a fun game. And then they read the cards and they're like, whoa, like this is good. Like I wasn't expecting that, but it really kind of puts you in that mindset where it's about to get real. We're going to find some real things out about ourselves. And it's part of like self-discovery and personal growth. So that's what I'm excited about, and that's what's next. And it's public now. Thank you for your platform.
Raimy, last question.
Amazing. I don't know. Besides for the clarity cards, tell listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me. Yeah, my website, jeremyhaselwood.com, and that's HASELWOOD. Also, Instagram, jeremy.haselwood, or LinkedIn, of course, same name. So you can find me there. I'm easy to find. So reach out if you have questions about anything we talked about today. I also do workshops for personal development and growth. So if you want to connect on that, let's work.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for being here with us today.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. Loved it.
You're welcome.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thank you, guys.